that's what I love about this business, is that it is never just one person pulling off an outcome, is it? We are pulling in a whole variety of different people, and you're absolutely right. We need to get all of those people on board.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5. And I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I am joined by Jane Ledger from Jane Ledger Interiors. Hi Jane, how are you?
I'm well, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining me from sunny Perth.
Thank you for having me.
I love to start every dialogue by finding out, what can you see out your window today?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and you're absolutely right. I am coming to you from Perth in Western Australia, and it is definitely one of our beautiful sunny days here. So I'm talking to you from my home studio where I'm looking out onto my front courtyard. It's sort of part of the reason why I bought this place, to be honest. It's just a small apartment in Claremont and it's north facing, which I absolutely love. And I'm looking out onto a beautiful, somewhat overgrown olive tree, a lemon tree, and I have to confess some weeds as well, but we will leave those for now, right?
Yeah. We can't get to everything.
No, not today anyway.
No. So for those of us who don't know you, tell me a little bit about your business and where you've gotten to today and the path you've kind of taken to get there.
Yes, sure. Okay, so I'm one of those people where interior design is my second career. So I had a completely different life, Beth, before starting my interior design business. So I was in the corporate world for just over 20 years, and I had different roles in law and law firm management. So I did graduate as a lawyer, but that didn't sort of do it for me. So I then went on to do further study in business, and that then led me to hold various roles in law firm management, including marketing, human resources, strategy, performance. Wow. My goodness. Yeah. So it was quite as you can tell, a bit of a corporate environment. And 12 of those years I spent living and working in Sydney.
Yeah, wow.
Which is, Sydney is one of my favourite places in the world. But as I came towards the end of that period, I did wonder, what else could I do? Because I'm always fascinated by people and how they end up in different areas of life. And I wondered what it would be like if I used my brain in a very different way. So using that right-hand side of my brain, having worked in this environment that obviously was quite structured and leaning into those left-hand brain skills. So I took myself off to design school. So I actually attended the International School of Colour and Design in North Sydney.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of design diplomas there. That was really an experiment, to be honest. But wow, once I got into it, that genie came out of the bottle, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this feels like home to me. Yeah. Not only do I love it, but I actually think I can start a business out of this. And so I did. So that was about 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. I started my business. I returned to Perth, which is my hometown. And yeah, I started my business in residential interiors and design. And that's what I continue to do. So my practice is directed towards renovations, new builds and furnishing schemes for private residential clients.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so many questions from that.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
so because I think one of not surprising, but it is surprising in a way. One of the most common things of all the people that I interview on this podcast is that they have come to interior design as a second or third career. Whether it's because they always wanted to do it, but were kind of told, no, do something sensible, and then they've kind of gone and done that sensible thing and they've realized this really isn't for me. But
Yes.
or there'll be someone who is kind of doing something creative. So like a lot of people seem to do music or have a musical background, and then that's kind of run its course and then they kind of move on to this next creative field. So it's either that they've done another creative or something completely different. That whole time that you were in that legal corporate world, which I have to say, could you find anything more further away? Was were you always the person, like, did your friends always come to you and go, oh, you've got such a great eye, like, can you help me with this? Or was it never on your radar at all?
I would say that it wasn't specifically on my radar because I grew up in an era, and I certainly went to school and graduated from school in an era where, despite whatever creative leanings you might have had, I was still directed down that, let's say, academic path.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, well, yes, here are lots of things that you could do, because certainly when I was at school, I loved a lot of creative pursuits,
Mm,
writing, public speaking, debating, and but those things, I guess, weren't felt to be, you couldn't make a
sensible.
career out of that. And certainly the concept of going to an interior design course, that just, as far as I'm aware, didn't even exist when
Yeah.
I left school. But I always think that, as I say, I think people are capable of so many things in their life.
Mm,
And the way that I got to this was through a process of just it was a journey that I took myself through. So because I had coached other people during my career as an HR manager and getting into the performance and appraisal side of business, I turned some of that on myself.
yeah.
And it was through that process that I just came upon this area of interior design, and away I went. So it was a whim, it was an experiment.
Yeah.
And wow, it's landed me here, Beth, talking
Yeah.
to you.
You've
So
never looked back.
that's it.
And so from your your background, like the legal corporate background,
Mm,
and I suppose to anyone who's hearing this who might be in a similar situation, similar career, and they're like, oh my goodness, I have no transferable skills. What would be some of the skills that you think have helped you in your interior design business that you've brought across from your kind of corporate
mm,
background?
mm. Well, I'm also a huge believer that all skills are helpful in life. I don't care where you've been or what you've done. It's just who I am and what I've learned through
Yeah.
all the different people that I have met and interviewed. So I've interviewed hundreds of people as an HR
Yeah.
manager, and it always fascinates me the other skills that people have. And I promise you, all of those come in handy. For myself specifically, it's fair to say that when I embarked on this design business, it didn't really occur to me that skills that I'd gained during the previous experience would come into play. But
Mm,
not only did they come into play, they actually came right to the front of my business, because I
mm,
realized really early on that I needed a lot of those skills in my dealings with clients and in order to achieve the outcomes that
mm,
they were looking for, which is a lot of that project management skill, speaking to people, presenting to people. So, a
yeah.
lot of what we have to do as designers is bringing people with us.
Yeah.
So, we might have the idea, we've got all this creative vision, we're so excited to implement it, but we have to bring a whole raft of people with us, other design professionals, but our clients as well, most of all
Yeah.
our clients. So I just didn't realize that all of those meetings and presentations and board presentations
Yeah.
that I had to do, yes, as strange as it sounds, they were things that I leaned into very heavily
Yeah.
quite early on in my business.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I can imagine you're great on site negotiating, maybe some cranky tradespeople.
Oh yeah, and I think that's what I love about this business is that it is never just one person pulling off an outcome, is it? We are pulling in a whole variety of different people, and you're absolutely right. We need to get all of those people on board.
Sure do. With something else that I just wanted to touch on as well. So you clearly made like a very big leap from law to interior design. And
Mm.
did you go straight from interior design school into starting your own business?
Yes. Oh, Beth, I love it when people ask me this because I just have to make a massive confession that I actually started my business in my final year of study
Yeah.
because the fact of the matter was that I was in my mid 40s and I just thought, look, sorry, everybody else. I don't have time. And so I'm going to get going. So I had business cards. I had started building my own website, which, if you ask me to do that now, no way known to man could I possibly do it. But when you're motivated,
Yeah.
you
It's
learn how to
amazing
do
what you can get
something.
done.
And I think, look, the other thing, Beth, there were so many benefits to working in a large corporate structure, but one of them was this is going back to sort of the olden days, I guess, but we had an IT help desk.
Yeah.
So any time that any lawyer or member of professional staff had an issue with something happening with their computer or not knowing, there was a help desk that I could actually call. And I remember those people really fondly, but they also gave me massive amounts of knowledge.
Yeah.
So when I was in that final year of design school, I thought, rightio, here we go. I had left the law firm environment by then, so I certainly couldn't call them. But I realized how much I had learnt,
Yeah.
and I just got stuck in and went about building that website. And so, yes, I actually did have a couple of clients in Sydney before I left.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
no, it was just jump in, dive in. And I think because I had the reassurance in the back of my mind that it's okay if this doesn't work, I have this whole other career I can go back to.
Yeah.
But the truth is, when I left that industry, I knew I was never going back.
I can imagine. I I have a few friends who have left law firms and they seem to have a very similar sentiment. They're like, I really don't want to go back. I will make anything else work.
Right, right. And I have to say, look, I've got so many friends from law school
Yeah.
and just being in that environment. And, it's such a small percentage that stays in it, and all respect to them
Mm.
because, it's a full on environment. It's very demanding. And yeah, so, but obviously in the latter years of my time there, I was in management roles.
Yeah.
So whilst the pressure was there, I didn't have the same responsibilities as a as a lawyer did.
Yeah. 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 So interesting because I think, and the reason why I asked is because um, I've been talking to a couple of people recently about that kind of gap between when new designers come out of design school and they start their own business and they might not have all the business skills they should have or need to
Right.
have.
Yes.
And that gap can sometimes mean that they start a business, but they might not have all of the kind of setup that they should have.
Mm.
But also, it's quite a difficult situation that a lot of people find themselves in that it's really hard to get an internship or, just even like a junior position if you're coming into it as a second or third career and you might be in your 40s or
Mm.
50s. So it's this really interesting kind of little gap where I always find it intriguing. Like, I think people who come from maybe a more corporate business background, I think they most probably are a little bit more set up down that path. But
Yes.
for people who don't have that, there is this weird kind of gap where I think sometimes their business skills, they're good on the design stuff because they've been through design school, but business skills wise, they most probably just need a little bit of help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and that I would say applied to me as well,
Yeah.
in that there was no one who could tell me what to do. I had to work it out for myself.
Mm.
And I don't say that in a resentful way at all. I
No.
think that's part of learning is discovering things yourself.
Mm.
But I would also say, people have got people like yourself, Beth, and there are lots of designers out there now who
Mm.
have been in design firms or run their own business who are now educating designers on how to run a business. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of resource there. And I would also say to people, don't be afraid to contact people.
Yeah.
Don't email me because you will be lost in a long chain of emails. Pick up the phone because despite everything, I still believe that human connection is what gets you to the next step. There
Yeah.
are people willing to help you, and I want people who might be listening to your podcast, Beth, to know that there are people out there who want to help because we've been down this path.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is definitely changing. Like, I think in the last few years, that emergence of kind of the interior design business mentor, I think, is really coming up, because I think there is that
Mm.
gap. But I also think that the attitude of the industry, I don't think the attitude of the industry is changing, but I think it's been communicated better that
Yes.
people who have been in the industry for a while want to help people who are just starting out, because it's a really hard industry. Like, it's not the walk in the park that people think it is, and it's hard, and especially if you're working on it by
Mm.
yourself, it can be lonely. And so I
Mm.
think more and more people are kind of saying, just like you have, pick up the phone,
Yes.
call, talk to people, search out. You might not want to go and do an internship with them or something, but give them a call. Most people I know are more than happy to buy you a coffee and talk through kind
Yes.
of some
Yeah.
fundamentals of their
Yeah.
design. So I
Yeah.
think that's a great thing for people who are just starting out to hear that, because I do think
Yes.
a lot of senior designers are more than happy to share their knowledge.
Yes, I agree. And I also think that when you are, let's say you have just left design school, don't don't be put off by the fact that you think you don't have skills you can offer. You can. I
Yeah,
went to design school, 10, 12 years ago.
yeah,
When you're speaking to people who are in the industry and who you think are established, talk about what you can do
yeah,
that they may not want to do and that you
yeah,
think you may have learned a skill. I mean, particularly, let's be really honest on all the programs that are being taught now
yeah,
in design school. I didn't learn those.
yeah,
And I love people to talk to me about what they do know
yeah,
and what skills might help me and
yeah.
my business.
And
And
that's,
there's always an opportunity there.
yeah, and that is so, so true. And yeah, I've just was recording a conversation with another guest, and we were talking about um, being open to a different part, like just being open to opportunities. And I think that's a perfect example. Like, especially as you grow in your business, you do want to outsource things like maybe documentation and all of that kind of stuff. And so someone who's
Yes,
just come out of design school, who I am sure their computer skills, their drawing skills are much better than mine, I'd happily offload some documentation to them, kind of
absolutely.
thing. So
Yeah,
I think,
that's exactly right.
I think, yeah, that free flow of information about what you can do and what they can offer you, I think, is so helpful. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you have just recently launched your own podcast, and the premise is about educating future clients about what we do as interior designers and the
Yes.
process that interior design takes.
Mm.
What, what, why did you start the podcast? Because I think this is really interesting, because also
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with people about the lack of general education around what we do and where we fit
Mm.
into the process between the
Yes.
architect, the builder, the building designer. Like,
Yes.
where do we fit?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think part of what I was dealing with was not only people not understanding, but the lack of accessibility to real information.
Mm.
And for me, what I found in so what, I'm coming up for 10 years of practice now. And look, the truth is, like you, Beth, in your years of practicing, I've met hundreds of people and been to their homes and really, gotten to know people relatively well. But I found that they knew very little about us, but
Mm,
more so, it was difficult to find.
mm,
So whilst we all have websites and, I'm as guilty of this as the next designer, where on my website, I'm sure if you Googled it now, you'd see I've listed out a process and what I do, but that doesn't really tell people what it takes to get to a completed outcome. So
mm,
I know that clients and the people that might be interested in engaging our services are subject to a huge amount of imagery these days. Those images are completed, they're fully resolved, they've often been published. But what people can't find out is what it took to get there.
mm,
And I found there was quite a knowledge gap in what clients knew, but more so also it was about understanding what our skills are. So yes, we're creative people, but our profession is also highly technical,
mm,
and that comes as a surprise to people sometimes. So particularly early on in my career, there were perceptions that I came across that interior designers pick colours in inverted commas or go shopping or choose a carpet. I think what was lacking in those perceptions, which I fully understand, was this idea that interior designers go from start to finish in achieving an entire outcome.
mm.
And that surprised people. So the more I went around visiting people and coming across these discussions, the more I just felt, this just isn't right. This isn't fair.
Yeah,
It's not their fault that they don't understand what we do.
yeah.
And so I thought it was up to us. I also noticed that there was a lot of information out there for designers themselves.
Mm,
Couldn't really see where was that voice talking specifically to clients to help them understand what we do, because my goal was to create that understanding so that there was a greater degree of comfort and ease in the interior design relationship, but also I guess just elevate the perception of designers overall.
yeah.
So that they're my
Yeah.
goals. Yes.
Because it's so true. Like, you either have the people who think that we just fluff cushions, or there's people who kind of go, okay, I know you do a bit more than that, but I'm not really sure what it is.
Right.
And I think one thing that is so important when you're talking to a client, and I always find is the most successful way of communicating what we do, is actually talking about the value that you bring, because it kind of
Yes.
detaches it from, monetary things. But and once someone understands the value that you bring and all of that kind of stuff, they're kind of like, they're a convert, and they're like, oh my God, like, of
Mm.
course I want to
Mm.
use you. Like, why wouldn't I
Mm.
use you?
Mm.
But I think you're right. There's so much lack of knowledge around what is that value that we can bring and how to best get the value out of an interior designer. Like, don't bring us in at the end of a project. Like, think of us
Yes.
as part of your team. Like, we're just as important as the architect and the builder,
Mm.
in making sure that you do have that image that you see in the magazine is actually what
Yes.
you get at the end.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I find it really interesting that it is this kind of missing part of the puzzle. And I
Mm.
actually think in a way as well, it ties into what's happening here in New South Wales and is, happening across Australia as well, with these new building regulations around how, we are at the point where we're not a registered industry.
Mm.
And we're kind of getting shuffled into like building designers, and it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
interior design could almost disappear, because even kind of the regulators don't seem to understand exactly what we do and where we fit
Mm.
in the puzzle.
And I
Um,
think, look, so much of this is about communication. So it's
yeah,
educating people and communicating. And for me, and I think you're quite right, that whilst we're an unregulated industry, and I think that can be addressed in a number of ways, as you
mm,
say, it's underway in New South Wales. But one of the things that I think is a first step for designers in, I guess, enhancing people's understanding, is taking that on board and saying educating people about what we do is
Mm.
our responsibility.
Yeah.
And then my first place to start there is position yourself as a professional. So a
Yeah.
lot of us have studied, and I'm not going to get into a debate whether that's required or not, or should or
Yeah.
shouldn't. But at the end of the day, we are offering a professional service, and I think that's what we need to keep coming back to. And I would also say that it's up to us to communicate what we do. And when I say that, I don't really mean going through a long, laborious list of steps in a process. I don't think potential clients are that interested in that. That certainly can become part of our scope of work and proposal and fee document down the track. But in those very early stages, it's about unpacking what we do and not minimizing the work either.
Yes.
And the way that I have found to kind of gently fold these things into my conversations with clients is to tell stories about what I have done on my projects,
Yeah.
give examples. And often people, and I know this only comes with experience, but often people are referring to images or projects in my own website or Instagram, and they're pointing to something. And I will say something like, oh my gosh, yes, we loved doing that entire wall of built-in cabinetry for that family because they really had major storage issues in their home. So that was floor to ceiling, built-in concealed cabinetry with a bench seat overlooking the pool. And then I will just gently, and it does require a little bit of patience, and there's an art to doing this,
Yeah.
but then I explain how that came about.
Mm.
That didn't just appear, it was conceptualized by me, it was designed, drawn, documented, specified. Then I had to take the drawings to a cabinet maker, a stone mason, and engage with probably in the end 6 to 8 trades and other professionals to get that wall of cabinetry in. And that was just one of probably 7 or 8 major pieces of cabinetry that we did in this home.
Mm.
And so when you start describing things, I think people do get a sense and they
Yeah.
do understand. But a client will always, in my experience, downplay what is really involved only because they don't know. There's nothing sort of underhand in their doing this. It's simply that they don't understand that to get to that outcome of that beautiful bank of cabinetry, this is what's involved.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid of describing that.
And I think that's really interesting because I think, I see not a lot of interior designers' websites these days. They will step them through, and I'm assuming that it links with their fee proposals. Like, you've got 4 or 5 steps to the process, and they talk about construction documentation and design
Yes.
documentation. And the reality is that that's going over the top of most future clients' heads. Like,
Yeah.
they don't know the difference between a concept development and design documentation.
Sure.
But I think that storytelling, because you're right, most people would look at that wall of cabinetry and go, okay, well, you drew it and then it got made and then it got installed. And it's
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
you've gone from like step 1 to step 10 and you've just jumped
That's
over
right.
everything in the middle.
Yeah.
But I do think telling the story, and almost like if you had on your website maybe a graphical explanation of all the steps that are involved to get from a blank wall to a beautiful piece of built-in joinery, that really would help the client understand, one, the value you bring, because they can't do that. But also when then you come to presenting a fee proposal, they're going, oh, okay, like I can see why it costs this much because there's, 15 steps that we've got to go through. So I
And
think,
and us as the interior designer, we're managing that entire process. So the builder is not doing that cabinetry. They might be involved in getting the walls prepared and the flooring and the ceiling and the bulkhead, but you won't get the level of finish and detail from a builder as you would from an interior designer. And it's explaining that. Now, whether or not that can be put on a website, I don't know. But my experience is that these conversations happen early.
Yeah.
And the best way that I can do it is in a face-to-face or on a phone call. And
Yeah.
that's why these very early stages are so important, because I think it's also where we can start to be very transparent. And this is another passion area of mine, Beth, is getting the hard parts of the conversation out early. And I'm just going to put it quite bluntly, that means costs and money.
Yeah.
And I just feel like any kind of business transaction, yes, we're interior designers, but we are business people.
Yeah.
We are running a business. And I've, like you, I'm sure I've tested all different ways of doing this. But my experience is that when I speak to those hard, difficult things early, other things just flow beautifully. Now,
Yeah.
either the client doesn't proceed or they do, but my experience has been that when I face those things early and in the most gentle way possible, be honest about how much things cost. Because
Mm.
as interior designers, because of the breadth of projects we've been involved in, the types of design elements that we are doing, we do know how much things cost.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what's out there in online world and television, let's not even go there, does give people, I think, in some cases, false ideas about how much stuff costs. Now, I can't change how much stuff costs,
No.
and I make no apologies for that. But what I can do, and this is what I think clients should draw upon, is tap into my knowledge of how much
Yeah.
stuff costs, because we know.
Yeah.
And so I would say to designers who are also interested in educating clients, speak to the elephants in the room.
Yeah.
Speak to the things that are difficult to talk about or might be uncomfortable to talk about or that others aren't talking about.
Yeah.
Because trust me, that's when people will respect you more and you will gain their trust, whether or not they are able to take their project forward with you.
Yeah, and I think as well that's really interesting because, you know, post-COVID, what people's expectations is when it comes to building and renovating, like, you know, it's doubled like what you need to spend to get, you know, what you could
Yeah.
pre-COVID. And I don't think necessarily, I think there is some awareness of that, but I don't think there really is to the full extent of how much it has
Yeah.
changed.
Well, there's always hope, Beth,
There is
and
hope.
this is what I love. And I don't sort of put this on the client. It's not their fault at all. I love that they're so hopeful that it might be this, but the budget can never be what you want it to be. It can only be what it actually is. So I just feel there might be multiple elephants in the room, but let's talk to them, address them early. And once the business side is out of the way and the money,
Yeah.
then we can get going and produce a really amazing, beautiful, and fully resolved outcome for our
Yeah.
clients.
And I think that's really interesting because I think um I think where designers let themselves down a little bit is when they don't address those things. But they just want to talk about the nice things and they'll go, we'll get to the
Yeah.
money, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. And the reality is that that's when the projects go sour because
Right.
the client has fallen in love with this beautiful design that you've put together. They love it, kind of thing. Then it goes out to tender or the builder and they come back and it's like 3 times what their budget is. And then no one is really looking very good because anything from there is a reduction in, like, you haven't managed the client's expectations very well.
Yes. Yes, I
And so
think that's
I often think that you're right. Designers need to be more upfront with and talk about money. Like, money has got to be in the conversation from day one, because
yes.
I think this is actually another place where designers can absolutely shine, because it's that communication with clients and going, okay, well, do you actually need 3 living spaces? Why are you telling me you need 3 living spaces? How about we go back a few steps and talk about it? And what are you actually wanting to achieve? Because this is one of those areas that we bring value, because we are able to, maybe we can give you what you need, but, you know, in a smaller building envelope or whatever it is. And so that we can get maybe closer to what you're wanting to achieve, closer to the budget you want to spend. But if you
Yes.
never have those conversations with the client at the start, you don't know that. And it just, Yeah, I see so many
I agree.
designers come a bit of crop there, and I'm like, have those hard
Yes. And I
conversations.
think I agree. And I think what I'm loving about our current environment is that more and more we are speaking about what you really need in your home.
Mm,
Why are you building it or
mm,
renovating it? What is it really that you need? And I think you and I and most designers, we have all looked at plans where there's just been a sheer excess of
yeah,
space.
yeah.
Space not planned well is
Mm,
another problem. So homes that are designed on the basis of ticking boxes and what you should have. So there's a
yeah,
lot of shoulds that have flown around in the past. And I love that coming out of this era, let's call it, of the COVID years, there is far greater attention now on what we really need to have,
mm,
what is important to us as an individual client that we really want to have in our
yeah,
home. And as designers, part of our role is helping people weight those priorities and also give broad advice on where to invest and where really you don't need something or you can save by a switch in material or other ways of going about it. And as I say, I'm just so heartened by the fact that this is becoming so much more common in our conversations, in our language now. And I'm all for it, Beth. Let's
yeah.
keep going.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's really great. And I think as well, like even around like designers educating themselves more and more around what things cost. So like
Mm.
I can't champion what Gemma Gillett from Studio Gemma is doing enough with
Yeah.
her joinery education.
You and me both. How amazing is Gemma?
So awesome. But I just think what she's doing, it's that kind of, and I think I said it when we were talking to her, like design school kind of gets you to the front door. And then
Mm.
it's actually on the job training, talking to senior designers,
Mm.
going through the process of having projects built. Like that is
That's
what
right.
gets you into the real nuts and bolts of what
Mm.
it's
Mm.
cost and how it works. And so I think, it comes back again to if you've had that hard conversation with a client around what their budget is, and never believe a client that says, oh, I don't know what the budget is. Like, I'll just see. Like, that is every single person has a budget. Like, doesn't matter if it's
Exactly.
$100,000 or $10 million. They've all got a budget.
Well, you
So
simply start saying figures and then you
totally,
quickly discover that people have a budget quite
totally.
quickly.
Usually there's an
Yeah.
expression,
Yeah. Right.
um,
Yeah.
but I think as well, like if you understand the implications of like the cost implications of what you are drawing on your screen,
Mm.
you are just giving the client, once again, so much value, but you're really giving them such an educated design because you're not going to present them with something that is going to cost, 3 times what they can afford.
Yes.
And so then they're not falling in love with it and you're not having to kind of go backwards because no
Yes.
one is ever happy with that. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I
I
just think,
think also it is drawing upon all the people that are part of our team on a
yeah,
project. So, and I know that Gemma talks about this a lot too,
mm,
and I certainly have done this. I've learned so much about cabinetry from my cabinet makers, one
totally.
in particular. So, and I just think when you're, so, to your listeners, if there are other designers
Mm,
wanting to understand what can I do, certainly, wear out the shoe leather, go around to suppliers, get them to educate you. They are more than happy to
yeah,
share their knowledge about products, materiality, the practical application of different materials,
yeah,
and really dive into that. There is no shame in not knowing something. Quite the reverse, they'll be delighted that you want to understand it. And I think when you're on site and if you get the chance to do a full project as a early designer, just lean into every single trade that's on that site
oh,
because
totally.
that's I have learned so much about how things work, and that's worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely. And there is so much respect that comes from, like, I have not met a tradie yet who doesn't love to have a chat about what they're building. Like, a good tradie loves what they do and they love to explain it to you. And I
Mm,
think just have a real appreciation that the more information you can absorb you are just going to be a better designer, because if you can have an understanding how something is built, or what goes, like what happens behind the tiles on the wall and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff, you are a much better designer, and therefore you are bringing even more value to your clients. And to kind of go back to where we started about that storytelling,
Yes.
if you've got those conversations in your back pocket that you've had with the builder, and say the client comes to you with this beautiful bathroom image
Mm.
that you've done, but you can clearly see it's not going to work in this home because of, site
Mm.
restrictions and stuff like that, you
Mm.
can talk to that and show that knowledge, and it just shows that you are this designer who knows what they're doing, because
Yeah.
you've got the knowledge. So yeah, I think, yeah, designers just need to absorb it all as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so with your podcast, so obviously it's about, like, you've talked to some amazing designers and kind of understanding their process and a whole heap of different things. How do you think designers can use your podcast to help them?
Yeah, it's such a great question because when I was, I guess, developing the content and imagining who was listening, certainly it was, as you know, directed towards clients and people on the outside looking in. But of course, I also knew that other designers would listen.
Yeah.
So the truth is, I have been overwhelmed with messages of support for the
Yeah.
podcast. They have come from people I don't even know who are sitting in that client position of looking in and going, oh wow, I just didn't realize how technical it was, or I didn't realize that it's a very end-to-end process that designers are doing. But as much as that, I've also received huge messages of support from other designers, because I just know that when I when I catch up with a group of designers, oh boy, I'm sure it's the same for you, Beth, but we have some tales to tell. And it's having that level of support for what we're doing because we understand what each other
Yeah.
is doing. So yes, it's quite right that other designers are chiming in, and I'm all for it,
Yeah.
because anything that is educating our clients is educating them on the professionalism of our work
Yeah.
and elevating the standing of all in the design industry. So
Yeah.
I'm absolutely thrilled that that has been a sort of secondary goal to launching the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, because I think like I've been a long time listener of Amelia from The Undercover Architect, and I think
Oh, how amazing is Amelia? Oh,
yeah, and I just
gosh.
think she's done such an amazing job on educating clients through that
Mm,
build architecture side of the process.
mm.
Um, but I think it's so great that we now have something like this for what we do, because I think we bring so much value to a project. We just need to help people understand that. So
Yes, yes. And I think too, going back to one of your earlier points about when interior designers are engaged, I think that's a fascinating topic as well, because really the truth is that when I started my business, and it's still the case now, and I think it's the case for many designers out there, that they are the one that is approached first.
yeah,
And so that gives us a huge opportunity to assist our clients to say, okay, yes, this is what I can do. Because again, clients' hopes and dreams, they're founded in hope, I
yeah.
guess, of get this interior designer around and she or
and
he,
sometimes and
they're going to be
sometimes some
able
fantasy.
to. It is a fact, but that's, I love it. Why not?
Yeah,
I don't want to burst the bubble,
yeah,
but I also, we all play that balancing act of bursting the bubble, but at the same time, gently explaining, no problem at all. I would love to build that outdoor cabana for you. This project needs a builder, a draftsman. I will do all the interiors. I can do all the interior drawings, and here are all the trades that I think are going to be needed. Now, I say that early.
yeah.
I don't say, yeah, yeah, oh, amazing, I'd love to do that. And then halfway down the track, going, oh, sorry, I meant to mention that you're actually going to need a builder to do that. Now, this sounds really obvious and almost a bit of a silly example, but it's not.
No.
It's actually real. So what I love is that people on the outside do come to interior designers first. I
Yeah.
think that's amazing. And then we are the ones, because again, we've been involved in all sorts of different projects, we can then direct them as to who should be in that team.
Yeah.
So you know that we often need, and I'll say this needs an architect.
Yep.
I can do all the interior drawings, no problem, and I can execute that vision, but we do need these other professionals. And that's another part, I believe, of being honest
Yeah.
and being honest early.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Like, I think that is something as well that might be a trap for junior, like, or people who are new to
Mm,
the industry. It's okay to say that's outside of what I can do. That's
right.
outside of my scope, outside of my capabilities. But I know here's a couple of architects who I've worked with recently or regularly who can help.
Mm,
And here's a couple of builders as well. And here's, a drafty. I think, it comes back to so often what we hear on this podcast is, so it comes down to your relationships with not
yes.
only clients, but relationships with other people in the industry. And once
Mm,
again, if you're able to say, okay, this is all of the people you need, and here is 2 recommendations for each of them, it just
mm,
shows that, once again, it comes back to it showing the client what value you can bring to the project, and it's showing your credibility and your knowledge. So
yes.
I think I think there's only benefits to you of behaving in that way.
Yes, and look, I truly believe that the best project outcomes happen when we are entering into collaborations with
Yeah.
other like-minded professionals. But I guess there's the key word,
Yeah.
like-minded. So all the professionals that I recommend on a team,
Yeah.
they have similar values, attention to quality and detail that I do. They don't look at a set of drawings and go, oh, why do you want to do that? Or we can't understand that. Not all trades are created equal, as you
Yeah.
know. And it's really important to me that in assessing whether there's a project that's got alignment and is best suited to my skills, that I can also have a say or suggestions about who needs to be in that collaborating team. I think that's something, it's just critical, I think, to the success of projects. So,
Yeah.
I guess this just comes with experience, Beth, but as soon as I hear my cousin's uncle is a tiler, so he can, and I will just say, and I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I just say, that's great. The way that my business works and to get the outcomes that I achieve, I'm not able to work with tilers that I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not able to work with a plumber I don't know. And so I'm really happy to chat that through with you, but I won't be able, no, we won't be taking this further.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's there to lose? There's nothing to lose. And I certainly think there are ways of saying that
Yeah.
in a respectful and gentle way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're right. A lot of that comes with experience and the
Yeah.
confidence. And usually it's because you've gone through 1, 2, 3 projects where you did use their second cousin who was a tiler and
Right.
was an absolute disaster. So if anyone's out there who's thinking of using their second cousin's tiler, don't. So yeah.
Yeah. And
um, so Jane, what are you looking forward to in the next 12 months for your business?
oh gosh, look, so many things, Beth. And what I love about our business is that there's always a new opportunity, a new client, a new project
Yeah.
around the corner. But what I have really enjoyed in 2023 is I have made a conscious decision to step out of the mindset and dynamic of the COVID years, where we were all completely slammed with work. It was chaotic. It was at times stressful and quite overwhelming. I have really taken a conscious decision that I want to step out of that mindset. I'm not carrying that forward with me anymore because I don't need to.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking on fewer clients and more aligned clients. So I'm just so excited about being able to give my creative energy and my space to those projects and those clients who really value what a designer brings to their project. And of course, I am totally excited about growing the community that has already been engaging with my podcast, Inside Design, in understanding and recognizing the professional work that we do. And I think there is so much for us to celebrate as designers in what we do. Let's not shy away from what we do. Let's talk about it. Let's get excited about it ourselves, and let's create that excitement within our clients and their projects.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Wow, that sounds like a very exciting 12 months ahead. I think, yeah, and I love that kind of, paring back and just really focusing on the clients that are going to be nice clients to work with, because it's all
Yes.
aligned and all that kind of stuff. That's a really
Yeah.
lovely way to go into the next 12 months, which is pretty much 2024. So, yeah, that's
No.
awesome. So tell me, how can our community connect with you, hear the podcast? Yeah, all of those things.
Everything. Okay. Thanks, Beth. So, my podcast, which is called Inside Design, is available on Apple, Spotify, or wherever people are listening to podcasts. People can also find me on Instagram. My handle is at Jane Ledger Interiors, where you can see my project work and also when new episodes of the podcast come out. So I also use it for that. And people can also swing by my website, which is janeledger.com.au, to have a look at my portfolio work and a little bit about who we work for and how.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jane. And we will link to all of that in the show notes for everyone. Once again, Jane, thank you so much. I think what you're doing is so great for our industry. I think there will be a lot of designers who will be flicking your podcast over to their clients and future potential clients. So
I do hope so. And Beth, I just want to say thank you for having me today.
my
And
pleasure.
I also want to say how much I'm loving your podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm just so thrilled that we got to discover each other in this way. So well done on everything you've done also.
Thank you so much, Jane. I really loved our chat.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next design dialogue.